Contrary to what some might think, temperature and heat are two very different concepts, but they have one thing in common. Both are related to thermal energy. The thermal energy of a substance depends on the number of particles and their degree of agitation. In other words, it depends on mass and temperature. Changes in mass and temperature have a proportional effect on thermal energy. As the number of particles of a substance increases, the thermal energy also increases. Similarly, the higher the temperature, the higher the thermal energy. The opposite is also true. When the number of particles or the temperature decreases, the thermal energy of a substance also decreases. Let's compare a small glass of water at a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius and a pitcher of water at 50 degrees Celsius. Which container of water has more thermal energy? Here's an analogy to help us understand the concept. Let's assume that the number of books in each stack represents different amounts of the same type of substance. The mass of one book represents its temperature. The total mass of the stack represents its thermal energy. The small stack contains 2 books, each weighing 400 grams, while the large stack contains 10 books, each weighing 200 grams. The total mass of the stacks is 800 grams and 2,000 grams, respectively. If you have to move one stack of books and use the least amount of energy, which stack would you move? The stack with the total mass of 800 grams would be easier to move. Although the books in the larger stack have smaller individual masses than those in the smaller stack, the small stack contains fewer books and therefore has a smaller mass overall. Now back to the example of the water containers. The temperature of the water in the glass is higher than in the pitcher. However, it contains fewer water particles, so the glass of the water has less thermal energy. Now we can define heat and temperature. Temperature is the measure of the degree of agitation of the particles. The more agitated the particles, the higher the temperature. Temperature is typically measured in Celsius or Kelvin and sometimes in Fahrenheit. Heat is the transfer of thermal energy from one object to another. When 2 objects with different temperatures come into contact, the agitated particles in the higher temperature object collide with the particles of the lower temperature object. Particles of the object with lower temperature become more agitated, while particles in the object with higher temperature slow down. Heat flows from the higher temperature medium to the lower temperature medium. Heat and thermal energy are measured in joules. In summary, temperature is the measure of particle agitation, while heat is the transfer of thermal energy from one medium to another. Although temperature and heat are related, they're very different concepts.